Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Wrestling Inc. Daily. It's me, your managing editor of WrestlingInc.com, Nick Hausman, joined here as I am every Thursday to get thirsty for some pro wrestling punditry. It's our good friend Paul Pratt, a.k.a. Pollo Del Mar. Paul, welcome back to the Wrestling Inc. Daily.
Hey, Nick. Good to be back.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's award season, obviously, here with the Wrestling Inc. Daily. For those that don't know, we were nominated by Outsports, which is a division of SB Nation, for Best LGBTQ Pro Wrestling Podcast. Did I get that right? Is that the
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So yeah, we because and it's this show with Paul, because Paul is here
explicitly.
Right. Because Paul is here, we are allowed to be nominated for this award, and because it's award season, I'm going to go into shameless self-promotion mode here. So as you can see, I've added the rainbow flag as part of my cacophony of noise background, because we want to try to win this award, Paul.
Absolutely. You know, I'm very, not only is the show nominated, I'm also personally nominated for Journalist of the Year or whatever, I guess. In part because of the work I've been doing with Wrestling Inc. and of course being published this year in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So that's and this is specifically for pro wrestling viewers. And of course, and my alter ego, or as I like to say, my alter she-go, is nominated for 3 different awards. So it's a good time for us. 5 award nominations. And, you know, it's unbelievable to me. Like, I remember like a year ago, when seeing like the QWI, which is like the Queer Wrestling 100 type of thing, and seeing so many of these cool, really interesting people nominated, and being like, man, someday wouldn't it be cool? And then here it's a year later, and not only am I like actually friends with a lot of the people who are nominated, but I'm sitting there as a nominee with them. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Congratulations, Paul. Congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much.
It has been awesome watching you just like the past year explode into the pro wrestling space like you have. So good for you. Very good for you.
Yeah, thank you. I remember when you first announced all the different podcast co-hosts, the one comment that stuck out to me, there was a lot of really positive feedback, but my mind works a very specific way. And it's all this positive feedback. And one person's like, man, maybe you should have gotten real pro wrestling personalities instead of like a comedian and a drag queen. And I thought, I'm going to prove you wrong. Give me just enough time and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, it was not, I'd like to think I have an eye for talent, but it wasn't hard to see that you already kind of knew what you were doing. And spoiler alert for everybody out there, Paul's going to be doing more with the site here. His role is continuing to expand and evolve. And there are legitimately some cool things in the works here. So we are full on. The Paul push is here. The Paul push is arrived.
You know, I'd like to think that part of what, you know, made you choose various co-hosts is like wanting a range of perspectives and kind of life experiences and things of that nature. And I think that people who look at, for example, even in the pro wrestling space, even look at my gimmick is like, oh, you're a drag queen. Like that's what your gimmick is. And yes, that may be true on the surface, but when you get beyond that, my character is actually steeped in the sort of like a long history of characters like that were not in drag. I just happen to portray a female character in the pro wrestling space, and I don't do it much differently. I mean, my basis for that character is Baby Doll from the NWA, iconic, who I always loved, and Sherry Martel. So, you know, these people, you know, those are what shaped my character. A little bit of Vicky Guerrero because I scream a whole lot.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, Antonio Garcia here in the comments. Congratulations. And that kind of echoes a variety of nice comments we're getting here. And if you want to join the show, talk about this, talk about anything we're going to get to here today, or just, you know, again, advocate for us to win this award, you know, let Outsports know this is ours to win. We want to engage you guys the whole show. So please leave a comment. We'll pull it onto the screen. We'll talk about it. You'll hear it in the podcast release in audio form as well. And we have a great show for you, not just all the news. Later on after the news, if you are listening to an audio form, you're going to hear the full audio from CM Punk's AEW Full Gear Media Scrum. Now, I will say, for whatever reason, CM Punk decided to like calmly whisper all of his responses in the media scrum. Very difficult to hear, even in the room. So we've done our best to zhuzh up the audio here to make it palatable. But it's going to be here. CM Punk in the house, and of course, at the end of the show, we'll dive into the mailbag. We're going to talk about some fallout from Full Gear and Dynamite last night, because of course there was a lot that happened on the show. New feuds coming around. That's what we'll talk about in the mailbag. But let's get to it here. News you can use. News that'll leave a bruise. And before we get to all the AEW stuff, I would be remiss if we didn't actually touch on real quickly everything going on with Ric Flair, Becky Lynch, and WWE. Because I'll be honest, Paul, from a strictly metric standpoint, this is the biggest story in pro wrestling right now, and it kind of caught me off guard. I didn't really know what to expect when Ric Flair brought his podcast back, but there's definitely a lot of interest here right now, Paul. I don't know if you want to just touch on that real quick before we kind of get into these notes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could understand why this would be so interesting to people, because this is not this sort of reeks of something that's happening off, not as part of a storyline. And I think that people are always especially intrigued in that blurring of what is fact and fiction, what is story and reality. And we're right on the cusp of that. And I'm not sure anybody knows exactly where it falls.
Yeah. Yesterday, of course, as we were wrapping the show, I was getting the highlights in for Becky Lynch's MMA Hour appearance. And I read some of those comments on the air, but I'm sure you've all seen them by now. She called his recent tweet sad and said he dug a hole and was generally just kind of dismissive of Ric Flair. So Rick started up his 2-tweet news cycle here with the first tweet. This one responding to Becky, he said, "So disappointed. I did this out of respect for you, Becky Lynch. I made you millions and made me nothing. After 40 years of being the man, the company doesn't own it, and neither do you. I'll always be the man. Ask your husband." What is that? What? Why not just end it with "I will always"? What's he implying there with Seth, Paul?
Well, I mean, I think it's hilarious because, under different circumstances, you might have implied something different, right? Like, exactly. I mean, if this was like a woman talking to a woman, you would definitely take that as something very sexual. But I think what it means is that Ric Flair is the one who obviously influenced somebody like a Seth Rollins. That, like to a generation of wrestling fans, Ric Flair, if you say the man, to be the man, you got to beat the man. You're talking about Ric Flair.
Yeah, I guess. Well, Rick's issues with people and his IP or direct property didn't end there. Today, he decided to put out this tweet, which is blown up all over everywhere, saying, "Speaking of legacies, WWE has decided to erase mine. That's all good. However, these 2 belts are my legacy, and I'd like them returned. I've asked twice, apparently falling on deaf ears. I'm assuming that next week on Flair Uncensored, I'll have to explain in detail and then with a long woo there." I'm very intrigued by this, and I think the reason this is getting so much attention is because what I think this all kind of started after Monday when he said, "Maybe I'll show up at Survivor Series and, get in your face or whatever, Becky Lynch." And we all didn't know at the time, is Rick just grandstanding or is WWE in on this? And I'd say in the 48 hours since, we've got a pretty hard response from WWE to Rick's attempt to kind of get back into the fold. And I'm just drawing conclusions here based on what we're seeing, but it does not appear that in the 48 hours since he put out the tweet implying he might be at Survivor Series, at this one, things took a turn for the better with his relationship. I don't know if you think that's fair to say or not.
Took a turn for the better?
It did not take a turn.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, this sounds like things took a turn for the decided worse.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
There are a lot of layers to this. When we announced, I remember it happened to be last week that we announced that Ric Flair was returning with this uncensored podcast. And my comment at that time was, what will this do for the lasting legacy of a Ric Flair? Right. What is this going to do to either cement or erode or forever alter what we think of Ric Flair. And I think that Becky, in large part, seems to be expressing something very similar. Like, this is becoming, she said sad, right? She called it sad. And it's becoming like, it is unfortunate to watch, and I think that specifically in light of all the things we've seen regarding the dark side of the ring and the information that's come out in regards to that, and now this is just continuing this path of eroding the memory that a lot of people would have had if he had just zipped it,
Yeah, I think it's it's pretty obvious what Rick's trying to do, right? He's trying to take back control of the narrative.
Yes.
He gets to put this podcast out, but for every kind of headline that's like this, he gets to respond with his take on CM Punk and Bryan Danielson over in AEW, right? And I think in his mind, that's kind of he's on the offense, right? He's getting his name out there. There is bad press, but there's also like people want to hear Rick's thoughts on things, and we'll see how that plays out. Rick's last podcast, I don't believe lasted that long. I think Mark Madden has gone through a couple podcasts that really didn't last that long. I've been in this game. I've done several podcasts. They don't all last this long. Is this a strategy that's long-term for Ric Flair, right? I think I'm as interested as anybody is to see what happens from here, if that makes sense.
If I were somebody who had Ric Flair's ear during this time, I would have told him that now is not the time to do any of this. We are in a society that has fairly short-term memories. So just go off and enjoy being Ric Flair and do whatever Ric Flair does when he's not in the press, when he's not trying to grab headlines, when he's not a focal point of a television show or a pro wrestling promotion. Do those things, enjoy some time with your wife, hang out with your kids, your grandkids, whatever you do, and just give it a few months to cool off. But to turn around and do this as we're still on the, like the downhill slide from the dark side of the ring, it doesn't bode well. And the people are going to be tuning into this podcast for all the wrong reasons. They're going to be tuning in to rip him to shreds and pull quotes and individual things that are going to be used to further cancel him. So if you just took some time off, like, come on, guy, you deserve it. You're 72 years old or whatever.
Well, and I do think that there's an element of the clock is ticking with Rick, right? You only have so much time to enjoy, these years and, that whole kind of thing. And he's kind of scrambling again. I don't really know that this is an effective or good strategy for him right now. But the thing I honestly like personally is somebody who like has to write and all of that about this. And I'd kind of like to move on here because we have more fun things to talk about. But the reaction, right? Like, it's not, if I have Jimmy Corderas on and Jimmy Corderas says, I don't know if Hangman Adam Page can move the needle, which is something we'll talk about here just a little bit, right? Jimmy Corderas, nice Canadian man, 20 years in the business. He's allowed to have his opinion. People want to go down there, they can talk about the merits of Adam Page. I don't like that when Rick content goes out, I have to watch all these people because then people jump on Rick's side and then against it, and it becomes this kind of messy squabble. And I know that you and I both wish he would kind of just take some time to let it lay low, but that's not the state of it right now. And it's those things are frustrating and difficult to watch.
And particularly at his age, there's nothing that prevents him from just being the Ric Flair of legend and just allowing that to remain. Like it harkens back to a lot of the storyline that he had with Charlotte towards the end of his run in WWE, which was where she was legitimately saying what so many people might at this point be thinking, like, Dad, just go home. Just let somebody else have the spotlight for a minute.
Yeah. And, Elizabeth Fox here, and I guess we'll close here with a comment. So, or comment and question. Hey, Nick, do you and Paul think this could affect Charlotte in the future? I was excited for the match between her and Becky, but I am scared for what is going to happen for her now. And I don't really want to jump to conclusions, but I do wonder if there hasn't been private conversations between Becky and Charlotte because, like, I don't know. Like, do these two really want to show up and fight backstage for real? Like, do they really want to have to worry about trusting each other in the ring and all this type of stuff? Like, I mean, it's obvious the whole world is hanging, by a thread here on their attention. I I hope they've worked it out, because like Becky was honestly pretty soft on Rick. You know, she was honest, but she didn't like go in. I mean, she could have really gone in on the guy. She didn't really do that. You know, I hope behind the scenes cooler heads would prevail. And I hope and if Charlotte really is in a spot right now, I'm sure having these other issues on top of her personal frustrations with trying to be recognized for her spot are very frustrating and probably do bring her a lot of like anxiety she doesn't need. So
I'm going to say that I think that there is a through thread of reality in this beef between Becky and Charlotte. I think that it has become very, very real. I think that is almost unavoidable when the entire world pits you against each other and compares you with one another. No matter how good of friends you might want to be behind the scenes, it will erode that. And I think that the addition of probably what is legitimately some of Charlotte's actual frustrations with her dad, but seeing her dad kind of like do this. I mean, can you imagine, like, you know, we were all humiliated when our mom came to school to pick us up and yell at us or whatever. But like, if your mom's like getting in an argument in the schoolyard, you know, with your friend, nonetheless, you know, it's like, what are you doing? Like, stop it. I don't know that there's going to be any backlash against her from WWE's perspective, because I'm sure that they, to some degree, fully understand that it's Flair, but
it's like, how does it affect her carrying herself if she's screwed up in ring segments and she's pissing off Vince? Like, you know, there's boundaries. But again, I really hope for everybody's sake, they've all got together, realized how much money is here, figured out a way to work together.
A lot of money.
You can stoke stuff out in the wild, but for everybody's sake here, I hope that there's some goodwill behind the scenes. So anyway, we'll move on from that. I'm sure it'll be something we're talking about here for the foreseeable future. Last night was Dynamite. Last night, yeah, right. Yeah, next 2 weeks. Last night was Dynamite. Now we have some breaking news as we went live on the air. Showbuzz Daily released the viewership numbers. Just shy of 1 million viewers last night. 984,000 viewers. They did a 0.39 in the I can't read these right, but just under 1 million viewers last night for the show. Slight bump from the week before. Obviously, this was the post Full Gear show. Only maybe a couple percentage points up from where they were the week before. Do you glean anything from the fact that this was the post Full Gear show and we did see a huge rise from last week to this week?
Well, you know, Tony would tell you that less people are watching cable television, and there's other things. I mean, I'm so tired of the excuses. Like, honestly, just either give ratings credibility or don't give ratings credibility, but please stop making excuses every time somebody asks you about it. You know, it's like self-masturbatory when they get a good rating, and then if it drops 100,000, all of a sudden it's nothing but excuses, and that exhausts me. It's not necessary. The show is outstanding, and that's what it should stand on. Those are the legs, not the viewing numbers, because those fluctuate week to week. In terms of what we could glean from this, I do think that people tuned in, watched that show. It was outstanding. The pay-per-view was incredible. And I think that perhaps it inspired some people to tune in this week. And I think that, you know, the potential for a Adam Page and Daniel Bryan confrontation or other things of that nature could certainly bring people who might have, you know, wandered off last week.
I wholeheartedly agree. And before we get to the big hooks, because I think next week we will see a bounce up in the viewership because of some of the things we saw on this week's show. But of course, right out of the gate, they called out the elephant in the room. That was really smart. Kenny Omega, he just casually tells the Super Elite, I gotta go. I'm going to go away for a little bit. I'm going to go get healed up, all of that stuff. You guys watch the ship. Adam Cole says, I'll watch the ship. And Omega's like, no, I meant the Bucks watch the ship. And just like that, in 30 seconds, we know why Kenny Omega's not going to be around. And we have a tease for his feud when he comes back with Adam Cole. Could not have been done better, in my opinion.
It was, I mean, I thought it was excellent. And beyond the fact that Kenny Omega deserves the opportunity to go away and heal up and everything that's encompassed by that, I also think that the audience deserves a breather from Kenny Omega. You know, it is time.
And I got the vibe he's going to come back as a babyface, right?
I would undoubtedly.
Yeah. Well, just some details here from the Observer. He's got problems with his knee, shoulder, abdomen, hernia. He's got multiple surgeries on the horizon. They haven't been determined when they'll happen yet, but he is going to take time away for the first time in a while. And because there's a lot of rehab involved doing these multiple surgeries, they don't really have a return date. February was said, but that could be premature. He doesn't have a status update for AAA shows right now at the moment. So that's everything involving Kenny Omega. Kenny will likely not be around for a little while. But Bryan Danielson last night gets in the ring. We're all wondering where he's going to be going here with Hangman Adam Page. First segment with Page, and I mean, knocked it out of the park. We watched Bryan Danielson to go out and take all of those sports entertainment skills and apply them to his AEW style. And it was just the most magical thing I've ever seen. The WrestleMania reference, the ragging on Virginia. I was blown away. I thought it was really, really fun. What was your takeaway here from this exchange?
I mean, I thought that, first of all, the one thing I want to say about the takeaway from this entire episode for me, it was very thematic in a random way. And that is that this is how you do a reboot of your product without calling it a reboot. They hit start on every major character has a restarted storyline. It's a refresh for the viewer, because yes, we saw the conclusion of a lot of stories, but we saw so many things like this Bryan Danielson situation where he is coming out. It's a soft heel turn because he didn't do anything to really, underhanded or whatever. But definitely gave that heel vibe. It looks like they're going into this, where Bryan is going to be playing that role. And I think that he did immaculately. It was immaculate.
Yeah. I thought it was so cool, and again, it felt right. And Paige really needs a big dance. And they swerved. Booker T was talking about this week. They swerved a lot of people, even me. Like, I was sitting in the stands like, wow, Daniel Bryan won the Eliminator. Maybe they do run back Bryan Omega. They didn't really have a finish at Arthur Ashe. I guess you could. It doesn't quite necessarily feel like the moment for Adam Page like it did 3 months ago, but they didn't do it. And you wondered what was going to happen there. I will say I personally got the vibe something was up immediately in the media scrum after AEW Full Gear. If you go back, and I asked Bryan, I wish I had the clip right now. I asked Bryan about Eddie Kingston. We played it on the show yesterday, and how he felt about CM Punk saying that, invoking his name in that infamous Eddie Kingston. How he and everybody else looked down on Eddie. And I thought Bryan was going to kind of baby himself and be like, well, Punk's Punk, and, could say what it, but no. He immediately was like, well, it's true, right? Like, Eddie doesn't take care of himself. And I was like, what an interesting thing to say for Bryan. Yeah, right? Like, why would he do that, And I think he had to know. And B, maybe he's already thinking, like, as a heel, who am I going to get to dance with, right? Like, I don't know. I think I got really, really lucky with that particular response, because I knew something was up the way he responded to that question,
The interesting thing about this, too, one of the things that I particularly love about it is that when Bryan Danielson plays the heel, it completely erodes that whole sort of narrative that he's like the small guy, the underdog. It doesn't, that is forgotten when he's a heel. And right. I'm really glad about that, because that, first of all, that narrative had worn entirely thin during his time with WWE. And second of all, that is not the approach that it's not even applicable in AEW, because nobody there really is that giant to overcome, in most situations. So I really like, and I really like, and I had almost forgotten how great Bryan Danielson is as a heel, because we always think of him as that underdog babyface.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about him a little bit more in the mailbag. I also want to make sure we get in the CM Punk MJF confrontation. MJF cut this great 3-minute promo like he always does after a big pay-per-view victory. Out comes CM Punk face-to-face. Punk doesn't say anything. MJF offers the hand. Punk doesn't accept it, walks off. Thoughts on this exchange coming out of the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was again, I thought this entire episode was outstanding. And I thought that the blatant disrespect of just walking out and sort of smirking in his face and like walking off, you know, that for a character like an MJF, being blown off like that is not going to settle well.
Well, and here's the thing that I don't know that I've seen anybody talk about here. So at AEW Full Gear, after his match with Eddie Kingston offered Punk his hand, right? Or no, Punk offered Eddie his hand, right? Did the exact same thing we saw on Dynamite. And Eddie fibbed him, did shake his hand, left the ring. Again, much like the Becky Charlotte thing, I mean, I guess maybe someday when people write books and stuff, we'll kind of have a better idea. But I don't know how much of what happened with Eddie and Punk was totally two men that were working together and amicably and, you know, knew what they were going to say and things like that. I did think it was interesting that coming out of the pay-per-view, no mention of Eddie. Eddie's forgotten. And Punk takes that exchange that I don't know was planned and runs it back with MJF. There's a lot going on with that, and I can't even. I mean, like I may be overthinking it, but there was a lot of weird stuff going on right there with that moment. Not that I hated it or anything; it was just a lot going on.
Well, I mean, Eddie went to catering. Like he said that was how he was on the show. He went to catering. He had that encounter with Daniel Garcia and went to catering.
That's right. Sorry, that's right. It slipped my mind there.
He went to catering, and which only supports the fact that, you know, CM Punk, Brian, both say he doesn't take care of himself.
Yeah, and I guess he's like beat up with his arm or whatever coming out of the show, and he's working through that. So I mean, look, and Mox isn't around right now, which is kind of like, I don't know, man. It's weird.
It's to be completely honest, the talent on AEW is better positioned for people who are in that upper mid card tier to shift gears and take over in that main event spot for a little bit. Far better than the WWE is. You know, if you're not one of the top 3 or 4 people there, like you don't seem like anything. So AEW has the ability to shift through those things a little bit better.
Lastly here, before we get to the CM Punk media scrum, Dim Boys, the Briscoe Brothers were backstage at Dynamite. According to Fightful, they were just visiting. They live less than 3 hours away in Maryland. They'd recently fueled the rumor mill, teasing a match against AAA World Tag Team Champions FTR. Obviously, Ring of Honor no longer in the equation. Would you like to see the Briscoes in AEW?
Well, I was just with the Briscoes when they won the GCW World Tag Team Championships.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, very nice guys. Looking forward to seeing what comes up with that relationship. And I think, honestly, I think there's stuff probably happening behind the scenes where a lot of people from Ring of Honor are going to come over to AEW. I would not be shocked at all if Tony Khan bought that entire company's everything.
All right, Paul, well, I want to thank you for talking all the news of the day with me up top. I want to thank everybody for joining the question or the comment section over here. Charles C. Dowd, by the way, I saw you ask this a while back. We kind of touched on it, but any word on whether Kenny Omega is going to defend his AAA title before he goes on hiatus? We don't know yet. I'm going to try to find that out. I'll call somebody. Maybe we'll have an answer for that tomorrow. And, of course, thank you to AEW for letting me into the scrum to talk to CM Punk and all of that great stuff. Time for the mailbag at Wink Daily. That's the account to follow. So today's question, what is your favorite new AEW feud following Full Gear? Is it Paige Danielson, Punk MJF, Cole and Omega, which was teased, or is it something else? About 300 votes here. 61.6% Punk MJF, 26.4% Paige Danielson, 10.9% Cole Omega, and then only 1% for anything else. I don't even know what else there really would be. Paul, what do you make of the fact that Punk and MJF blew it out here 2-1 even towards this competition?
Well, you know, that was what I voted for. I wish that, you know, I just think that that's going to be an outstanding confrontation, which will ideally help cement MJF as, you know, just take him to that next tier of his career, put him even closer into that world title conversation that I think so many people expect him to be part of and already think he should be part of. But I think this is going to really solidify him.
See, I went with Paige and Danielson. I'm a little bit more on the hook for them. I think, the match is going to be a banger between those two guys. But I love what I saw from Danielson last night. I mean, I don't want a fantasy book in my head, but you got this kid who's on the first run of his life, and you got this kind of psychotic, grizzled vet rolling around trying to get into his head and mess with him. There's a lot to play with there, so I see both sides here. But back to Jimmy's point that I said we might address later. Is he a needle mover for AEW? I don't know right out of the gate. We didn't see a significant bounce in viewership this week for Dynamite. Interest level coming out of the show is about Punk and MJF, obviously here. Page is kind of the second fiddle, and he's only really, I think, super notable because you're working with a guy like Brian who's in his prime right now. I think this is the first time we've started an AEW championship run where it just doesn't feel the same, if that makes sense. Doesn't resonate quite the same.
I think that, I think that one of the things that we should also point out is that this is one of the first. This is, in fact, the first time that somebody's held the AEW world title who was not already a world champion elsewhere, or somebody who was touted, meaning Kenny Omega, who was touted as being a world champion somewhere, anywhere, as soon as he signed. Adam Page is truly a homegrown talent in terms of the fact that he came into AEW, and interest in him becoming a world champion has grown there. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something, as I'm prone to do around here, that may not win me any, bonus points with anybody. But I don't think there is somebody in AEW who is a needle mover. I don't think that exists. And I don't think that putting the impetus on any single person to become their champion and move this needle is fair, because every single person that could possibly move into that role right now is already on the roster, and they're not moving the needle from where they're at. So moving them, into the central focal point, I don't think is going to do it either. I think it's going to happen gradually over time as they begin to tell stories that compel people to return to their online product.
All right. Well, we will give Paul the last word for today on that one. Come on back tomorrow. I'm going to be joined by TK Trinidad coming onto the show for the first time. We will not have a Friday or Thursday show next week in honor of Thanksgiving. I'm going to take a couple days off to go spend time with Liz and the fam and all that. So don't be caught off guard when you don't see shows next week on those days. But on tomorrow's show, we're going to keep the media scrums rolling. We are going to have Dante Martin's AEW media scrum on the show. Of course, WrestlingInc.com is the home of the Wrestling Inc. Daily. We're on all your socials, and the Wrestling Inc. podcast goes live at night after the big shows, including tomorrow night after SmackDown, and, of course, Sunday night after Survivor Series. Paul, anything you want to put over here before we wrap up the show today?
Of course, you can find me on Twitch pretty much constantly at twitch.tv/Pollo Del Mar. My Twitter is the Glamazon PDM, as in the Glamazon Pollo Del Mar PDM. And if you jump over to my Twitter, I will definitely post and share the link where you can go and vote for us in the QWI awards, whether that's me individually, the podcast, otherwise all of the above, and all of your LGBTQ plus favorites.
Yes, right. Please vote for us. I don't have any awards on my shelf.
Oh my God, stop pandering with your pride flag. I'm as gay as we could possibly be. You don't need the pride. I literally am the pride flag, Nick. Gosh.
I just want to be a good ally. Okay.
A pride flag does that? No, it doesn't do that. But
I'm trying my best, Paul.
I know. Stop trying so hard, Nick. The kids on the playground will pick on you.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will talk to you tomorrow. And remember, if you winked, you didn't miss it.